Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Secret Origins of Mint Condition. I am one of your hosts, James, and recently you might have heard we did a podcast celebrating 40 years of Marvel's Secret Wars. But
Mm-hmm.
across the street, with a distinguished competition, was doing their own multi part crossover that not just encompassed the entire universe, but the entire history of the company and characters of its time.
Yeah.
It's a little story that you might know as Crisis on Infinite Earths. So we are celebrating its 40th anniversary
Yeah.
by doing breakdowns of this comic, but because Secret Wars, I think, happened in not in real time, but happened in the present moment and didn't encompass the entire Marvel history, we broke it up into two. But for Crisis on Infinite Earths audience, we are breaking it down into four quarters. So we're doing 3 issues at a time. So this is part one of our dive into Crisis. And joining me to do this, to dive into the Crisis, is of course Joe.
Thank you, James. This is a hell of a deep dive we're going to get here.
And of course, the curator of the Mint Condition Flash Museum,
There you
and
go.
a fan of all things DC Comics, is Keith Tarnowski.
Hey, James. Hey, Joe. Looking forward to this one. It's going to be a great one.
So I figured we would do this. I was just saying offline. We could start with just a little history of what brought Crisis to be. I mean, I'm sure that could be on its own several episodes if we want to do a deep dive, but we'll just keep it a little bit compressed. And then maybe we'll just give our overall impressions of when we first read the book, and then we'll just go an overview of the first 3 issues. And our, again, audience, as you know us, when we do things like this, we're not going to do a panel by panel, book by book type of thing. You can do, there's plenty of YouTube videos for that. But we're going to give you our overall thoughts, what stood out for us. A person like me, I have a lot of questions about this because I'm not as steeped in the deep lore as my 2 other hosts. That's why they're here, hopefully, to help me with that. So, but Joe, since I think you came to this in real time between the 3 of us, what would well, I guess either you or Keith, what brought on Crisis, and then we'll start with like when we first encountered it.
Leave that to Joe.
What brought on Crisis? Well, at this point, when Crisis hit the shelves, and the on sale date #1 was January '85. The cover date was April. Things are always a few months before the cover date. I was reading DC Comics almost 20 years at that point. And I was ready for a change myself because there were certain things I didn't like about. I hated the imaginary stories, especially in the Superman family of books. And there was some other things that didn't make sense, some continuity issues. And apparently the people up at DC were like having even more problem with trying to keep things, in balance and trying to rectify and codify. At this point, 40 plus years of golden and silver age DC history. So that's what brought this upon. I mean, Keith will know this. This all started with a little story in Flash, Volume 1, number 123, Flash of Two Worlds, 1961, Keith? Is that about right?
Yeah.
Early 60s, yeah. And that postulated the theory of alternate Earths. Now, alternate Earths have been postulated before in comic books, but DC, again, said, okay, there's Barry Allen. He grew up reading these comic books about Jay Garrick, but oh my God, Jay Garrick actually exists in this other world, in another dimension. And from there, this multiverse just exploded. And 20 years later, I guess the powers that be up at DC, Julie Schwartz, all the other editors must have said, okay, we got to clean house here, guys. We got to get this thing straightened out for new readers and for the old readers. And I'll add one more thing before I shut up. At the Comic-Con previously, probably in the summer and or fall of '84, I can remember a panel, and this came up. And I remember Len Wein and Marvel from being in the panel. And they were talking, what's going on? What is this thing we're hearing about, this Crisis? Who's this Monitor guy? What's he up to? And they said, well, we have a big story coming up next year. We can't tell you too much, but, and I remember this almost line for line, 2 of the most popular DC characters are going to be gone forever. And we find out in issue 7 and 8 who those are. And like a ripple went through the room, like, oh my God. I mean, I'm getting chills just thinking about it now. And it was like, holy cow, this is going to be really good. And yeah, it was. So, but yeah, that was, I think the powers that be just wanted to streamline things. And I think this was the first DC event. And till this day, I think it's still the greatest. So that's my little intro for you guys.
Oh, thank you, Joe.
You're welcome.
I had heard. I did a little, as much research as I could. I mean, not as much research as I could for this, but a little research. And I heard Marv Wolfman had this in his head for a long time.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Like he conceived of this way before they started doing it, of a way to sort of solidify the DC universe into, I guess, streamline the timelines and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, and I also know he's like, the Monitor and Anti-Monitor were just names on a page. He always hoped to find better names for those characters. And when he went to write the script, he's like, I guess that's what they'll be. Like, he didn't think of anything different. So, well, Keith, let me throw it to you. I feel like your depth of knowledge, especially in DC Universe, runs deep. So when did you? I think you shared that Crisis was your first entry point into comic books. But when did you? I guess. Did you go back then? I forgot for your origins. Did you go back and collect them all, or did you wait till this was collected? Or?
No, I actually there really wasn't a lot of trade paperbacks, if any, at that point. What happened? I picked up number 8 at a 7-Eleven with my dad. Because that cover, Final Fate of the Flash is almost like one of the most iconic covers ever. It drew me in. I had the action figure of Flash when I was a kid. Didn't know anything about him. I thought he was Flash Gordon too, by the way, when I was a kid. And that cover pulled me in. My dad bought me that and like a Slurpee, I think. And I read it. Was blown away by it, but I won't get into why because we're getting to that in other episodes. But blew me away. I didn't know at the time that my uncle, my dad's brother, was in the process of eventually opening up a comic book store. So he was like a big collector. He was already, buying collections from people. He was even doing some, like getting new books in from letting, I guess another store was including him on their distribution. And he was selling like on the side and doing like little mini cons. And I didn't know that. But I had no idea that was something he did. And I guess it just kind of came up. And he got me the first 7 issues, and I was hooked with the 8th issue, but I went back and again it was confusing, but I loved it. This felt like and I can get to this later too. It felt like there was real stakes in this. I didn't know at the time, and know that years later that death in comics would become kind of a revolving door and not really have the weight that it had then. But it really did. And, Joe said, they said 2 heroes would be dead forever. For comic time, they kind of were. Barry Allen, 22 years. Kara Zor-El, a little less than that. I mean, it was real consequences, and you felt it in the story. I was blown away. And before I hand it off back to you guys, one thing funny, James, you bring up the Monitor, Anti-Monitor name. I reading this again. I find it so funny that Pariah is the name of one guy. Harbinger is another one. I'm like, these are on the nose.
Really. I was thinking I was reading it this morning. Yeah, you can't get more on the nose than that.
So especially Harbinger, I'm like, okay, come on.
Harbinger of Doom. Yeah.
Right.
Keith, how old were you again when you read that number?
10 years old.
Wow. See, that's the best age. Just like when I read my Flash 163, stop, don't pass up this comic or I'll die. I was 10 years old.
I would say though, I'm spoiled. Like at least for a while, I was very much like, I came into it with George Perez art. So I didn't like a lot of stuff when I first saw things like right away. I'm like, ugh. Like I also like that, like the realistic look. So when I saw Brian Boland's covers on Animal Man, I love that. But man, when I first saw like Todd McFarlane or Mike Mignola, I was like, ugh. And now I love them. I love them pretty quickly after, but George Perez is like, that's like the Beatles of art,
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's like you had Mike, was it Leonardo da Vinci giving you the first comic book?
No, it really is.
Yeah.
Well, Joe, I guess Keith, just to fill in your story, then you guys, I guess, to finish it in real time then, right?
I finished number 12 on the A train on the way home from work from Barnes & Noble. The afternoon it came out, I went downtown to the Village Comic Shop, picked up number 12. Thank God that guy who was there a few years earlier who spoiled the Terror story wasn't there that day. I said I got to read this thing before I get home. I hitched half and I was buried my head in the book. Almost missed my stop, 80th Street on the A train. But yeah, I read the entire issue 12, which was a double-sized issue if I'm not mistaken, on the subway. So yeah, I had to finish it.
Joe, did this book have any delays back then? Did it come out
No,
monthly?
well, according to Mike's Amazing World of Comics, um, April cover date April '85 to March April '86. That's an entire year. That's 12 issues, right?
Wow.
Yeah. I don't think it was delayed once. I don't remember it being delayed. No.
I know Ordway did like some panels, but like
Yeah.
overall, that's incredible. Those books are,
Isn't it though? Yeah. For something this size, and it was this something like this wouldn't be replicated again without missing an issue until they did the new 52. If you remember at the comic book store, we had a big board up on the wall. Pick a box. When do you think they're going to skip it? When do you think they're going to miss a week? They never did. So,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
It must have banked everything.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, George Perez must need a lot of lead time. I mean, I just don't know how fast he was, but he's.
I guess he was fast in those days because later on, I think although there was health complications later on,
Yeah.
he slowed down.
Yeah.
But he was a young man at the time, and and like you said in the opening, James, Wolfman had this in his head for a while, so they probably started this. I'm sure they had a number of issues in the can before they even released this book.
Yeah. Well, I always when we did our tribute to George Perez a couple years ago, I remember them saying like he asked for the team books and the books where you had to draw lots of other artists would run from it and he's like bring it on, bring it to me. So this was his wheelhouse to draw.
Think about it: Crisis on Infinite Earths, George Perez, right? Then Avengers versus Justice League, right? He did that. And then Flash of Three Worlds with all the Legion, not Flash, Legion of Three Worlds with all the Legionnaires, right? I mean, really, the guy was just.
Those were massive, but he did Avengers too with Kirk Busiek, which was like.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Oh, I forgot that one. 34 issues, 35 issues.
But he didn't even need like extra. He didn't even need team books. Like if you look, like I could go back to like his cover of Wonder Woman #1 is so intricate,
That's
and
beautiful.
it didn't have to be. But that
Beautiful.
like he on his single books, like where he had like one person, he made the most intricate, detailed panels and covers, and yeah.
I think that's his best work because he's also writing and plotting that book and penciling it. I think that's the pinnacle of his career, that Wonder Woman book.
Yeah, that's another.
If you ever get a chance on Amazon, you can buy the George Perez poster book. It's like an oversized book, and it's a bunch of his covers.
Mm-hmm.
I can't recommend that enough. I think it's like usually $20-$25. It's always on there for like $17 on sale. I bought one and gave out like certain covers to like different like kids in my family and my friends. It's so worth the money. If they had that when I was a kid, my whole room would have been plastered in George Perez.
Well, I guess we should dive into it, Joe. Joe, you mentioned beforehand you did like a little. Not that we shouldn't give George Perez all the love in the world.
I know we can go on forever.
And we will continue to do so through this series. But and Marv Wolfman obviously for being able to tackle all of this. Let's not George. They both deserve all the kudos that we'll give them along the way. But Joe, you said you made a little summary. So want to give a little synopsis of #1, and then we'll talk about #1 a little bit.
Worlds across the multiverse are being eradicated. The mysterious monitor sends out Lila, a.k.a. Harbinger, a girl that he raised from childhood, across time and space, to bring back to him specific heroes and villains to save the multiverse, or what's left of it, from extinction. Harbinger is successful in returning to his satellite with our charges, but one of the one of the traveling aspects, because Harbinger had been split up into different beings to reach all those times, has been infected. One of the shadow demons. Shadow demons attack the assemblage in the satellite, but are driven off when the monitor reveals himself in all his glory and light. So yes. So right away, we have this gathering of these heroes and villains, not the ones you would think, not Superman, Earth One, not Batman, not the Martian Manhunter, not Aquaman, not Wonder Woman, but as you said offline, James, Scion, what's her name from the All-Star Squadron?
Firebrand.
Firebrand, right? Okay, I know who these characters are, but where are the big guns? But the Monitor had a reason for that, and which we learn as things progress. But that's basically my somewhat brief synopsis of the first issue.
And Joe, I was telling you and Keith, as I was saying, like I'm still, I guess I'm limited in myself. I have a lot more to read, but like, the Crisis is still the first place I've ever read a story with Firebrand, with Scion, with Solovar, Geoforce. Let's see who else here: Arion, Dr. Polaris, and Dawnstar. I've never really read books with any. So I think part of it is, and Keith, I guess for you, I'll be interested because this was your first book. Even now, for me reading this, I'm engaged in the story because it's a classic story, and obviously we're talking about it. But I found it hard for me to get into it first because there's none of the anchoring except for Superman and Green Lantern. Earth, and Green Lantern, obviously John Stewart. I've read a lot of John Stewart, but everybody else I don't have a real connection with. So I know you thought the issue blew you away. When you went back and read issue number 1 when you first did, were you still able to connect right away?
I was still super interested, and I think because I knew what was coming, and I knew it did, and even in Crisis 8, you see a bunch of other characters that I didn't even know them, but they have looked iconic and cool to me. I'm not going to lie. In the first issues, I didn't think Blue Beetle or Geoforce or any of them looked iconic and that cool. And now I love a lot of them, but I was still so invested by like the size of it. Just like I never read that. I never had experienced anything like this before. I'd watched Star Wars as a kid, but this was just something I knew where it was going. It just seemed so big and epic, and it also just seemed like mine. Like something no one I knew was like my family or friends or cousins weren't reading or a part of it. This felt like I felt like connected to it. Like it was something like for me, which I guess we all kind of feel like when we get into the hobby after a time. But so yeah, I was invested, even though I didn't know the characters. I've always been like fascinated like that with DC. If I see some obscure characters, I want to learn about them. I don't get like scared off by it. I'm like, oh, like what's like before I read a Hawkman comic, I heard how confusing his continuity was. I'm like, sign me up. I'm like, they look really cool with all those weapons. I love that they were a married couple and they were like fight like that. That seemed crazy. And I was like, I'll just read and read and read and read. And that was easier because they don't have a ton of back issues. Not like going back on Spider-Man, but yes, it definitely got better and better for me as the issues went on, and I started to like either recognize characters or just know that they were, I didn't really. I guess I knew Supergirl from the movie, but so seeing her, I recognized her. Seeing back characters that I was unfamiliar with, I knew that that it just kind of brought me in more as time went on.
Yeah.
Yeah. The book grabs you by the throat because we see the destruction of Earth 3, right? And I knew who the crime syndicate was, and I knew how bad they were for all those over the years, all those crossovers with the JLA and the JSA, and to see the crime syndicate actually trying to do super heroics to save their world, because at that point it's not heroes and villains, it's everybody, it's all hands on board to try to save the day, and then to see them get, wow, holy cow, this is of course. Keith said before, everybody comes back, but it was very, very dramatic to see that.
Okay. Yeah, I thought that was very dramatic too, because obviously I've had some time with the crime syndicate. It was good. I had forgotten about the whole Lex Luthor and Lois Lane and Alexander Luthor. The whole that plot line coming from, which I'm always I'm curious if that was like lifted like almost like line but for line by like Superman's origin, like Clark's origin, like the words that Marv Wolfman is putting into Lex Luthor's mouth to save his only son. But yeah, I think that was like the bet, like I think it's a good solid first issue. It definitely brings you in. It definitely grabs you. Of the three we're talking about today, I think it's the strongest. You guys can differ, but I think of the three of where we're breaking it up, I think it's the strongest of the three. And it gets you, yeah. And actually, this is the first reading I kind of really grasped that Harbinger was breaking herself off into all those different pieces. I don't know if I fully grasped that the last time I read it. I thought it was like she was individually like getting these people, not simultaneously.
I thought the same thing, yeah. And then I realized this time, no.
And then one of them gets infected.
Yes, and that's key to what continues to happen.
I'm with you, though. I think when I was a kid especially, and maybe even the last time I read it 20 years ago, I didn't quite pick up on that till this time. I thought maybe I even remember thinking, I thought she just picked him up, dropped him off, and then went on another mission. But then later they kind of showed that there's so much going on.
There's a lot going on, and so this is the first time, I guess, at the end, the big reveal of the Monitor. That's the first time we see him the full Monitor, right?
Yeah, we'd only seen him the year prior. The back of him sitting in his shadow of him sitting in his oversized chair, looking at his monitors, and I think we saw Harbinger or Lila, not as Harbinger, but yeah, he seemed to be like running, more to put it, in colloquial terms, running guns in the DC universe. And of course, that gets explained in I think issue 3 why he's doing what he did.
Yeah,
but
I didn't read it at the time, but when I went back later, I was getting all the back issues of Flash, like while I was getting the Crisis books and all that kind of stuff. There was an issue where issue or two where there was a little like panel or two where they addressed that the Monitor was providing weapons to the Rogues.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Lila was in there too, but she didn't have a costume. She just had like a red or like a purplish red like dress, I guess you could say. And then
And I read this tidbit, which I'm still like, I did know about this, but I never really kind of focused on it. Is like, I read that this is the first like in continuity in DC proper of the Blue Beetle in comics since being taken over from.
I believe that is correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Reading that was the one character in the entire assemblage that Lila brought back to the satellite that I had who is this guy? I don't know who he is. I knew of a Blue Beetle from the Golden Age, but that's about it. Like I knew about Captain Marvel from the Golden Age. Although by 1983, DC had been publishing Captain Marvel, aka Shazam, for over a dozen years. But yeah, I think that's the one character I was introduced to. Come to think of it, for the first time, was Ted Kord, aka the Blue Beetle.
Yeah, which is kind of crazy considering how he's made his way.
I thought it was a cheap Spider-Man knockoff.
Yeah, well, at least into our corner, and our friend of the show, Jeremy Adams, like he's one of the more popular DC characters, and this is technically his first in-universe debut, which is kind of crazy.
And I feel like he does kind of read like, and I get it because it Ditko and all that, like not exactly at all, but like he definitely has like the resemblance to like Spider-Man, like how he talks and.
I have his first 5 issues. He started out in the backup. Ted Kord started out as a backup feature in Captain Comet, not Captain Comet, Captain Adams' book.
Oh, right.
In the 60s, penciled by Ditko. And then he had a 5-issue run of his own book, and I have those. And that's gorgeous Ditko artwork. Beautiful stuff. Really beautiful stuff.
So was it a thing where, and I'm pretty sure it's true, at least for the most part, so the Scarab never worked for Ted, and I know we see something a little bit later in the first 3 issues, but I think that was the only time that was ever addressed. It just didn't really work for Ted. Did it work for Dan? It never worked like it does for Jaime though, because Jaime is like he's controls that and has access to all of his resources. But did Dan ever?
I'll have to pull out my Secret Origins, DC Secret Origins from the 80s, issue 3 for 4, which is the Blue Beetle issue, which goes from Dan to Ted. Yeah, I think it did work for Dan, but I'm not sure.
Huh.
Steve Perel, if you know the answer and you're out there, please let us know.
Wow, I didn't this is like again my holes in knowledge. Like I didn't even realize that Ted had a Scarab. I thought he was just all science. I didn't even know he had access to the.
He was given it to by Dan, and in the third issue, I think we can get to it. They show something where it actually does work for a second, kind of. But I also never thought of it over the years when I was reading, Justice League International, even the Ted Kord series. I read a lot of that took place at the same time, but it really didn't click with me until Countdown to Infinite Crisis, where they addressed it. It never worked for Ted. When Booster and Ted are talking, when Ted's trying to investigate what's going on, this conspiracy, either one of them mentioned that it just never worked for Ted, and I think Ted kind of took that as like a bad thing, like it didn't make him feel good that it didn't work for him.
Interesting, yeah. I always thought he was like, Blue Beetle in my mind, because I haven't read as much of the character as you guys, is always like the, I guess the less commercially successful Iron Man in some regards. Like Iron Man and Peter Parker, like they're scientists who invent things and they have gadgets that help them fight crime. But So I'll have to read more Blue Beetle. I will also say, reading this now, now I understand Psychopirate's powers. I don't think I always, when I first read it, understood who Psychopirate was and what he could do. Now I finally understand this character, who I guess at this point has become synonymous with just being involved in crisis in the DC universe.
Yeah, basically,
Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
It's like whenever there's a crisis in the Marvel universe, the Watcher shows up. Well, in this case, it's the Psychopirate in the DC universe.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Where I guess he's been a part of the future crises that have come after this, and
and also he played a role in Animal Man by Grant Morrison, which was great.
Oh, that's right. Yes, he was in that classic.
I forgot that.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
One thing I always, Josh Williamson addressed it in that Infinite Frontier book he did a couple of years ago, which I gotta reread it. I don't recall exactly how he played it out, but I wish he would have done more with it. But he did have moments where basically Barry Allen confronted the Psychopirate, how to deal with him in this new story, and I always thought that'd be something I would have liked to seen more of, because he helped the Anti-Monitor keep him prisoner and used his powers to make him a mess for a while, So I always felt that would I'm surprised didn't come up as like a recurring Flash villain when Barry came back,
Yeah, it seems like a character you could do more with, but
yeah, he's got interesting powers, It's why not?
Yeah. We have anything else we want to talk about with number 1 before Joe gives us the synopsis for number 2?
Well, I'm just paging through it and just looking at the layouts. I mean, we all know how great Perez is at drawing the human figure and drawing action, but you look at some of the layouts and the way he tells the story. Now, I'm going to assume this was full script. I don't think this was done the Marvel method, because I'm pretty sure Marv gave him a full script, but still, I'm sure he gave him a lot of leeway. Marv was also the editor of this book, basically. Although I think Len helped him launch it. I think, especially not issue number 1. But you look at some of the detail, obviously, but the way it's laid out, the way the story is told, it's just gorgeous. It's beautiful. I do want to say there's one character in here that when I saw her, I was very, very excited about. And he picked the one Legionnaire that I loved. I love Dawnstar. That's one of my favorite characters. I love her look. I like her powers. She can track anything across anywhere in the universe. And she's a great character, Native American character, and I just love her. And I'm so glad that she was in this. They didn't pick Superboy. Well, that would have been. They didn't pick Mon-El or Brainiac 5 or Lightning Lad or Saturn Girl. They picked Dawnstar, who was a relatively new character on the scene at the time. So I kind of appreciated that. And Marv, we'll talk about Marv too, because it's so well written. He nails the characters' voices. I think the ones that I knew for intimately, and for the ones that I was just peripherally knew about, like Simon and a few others. It all rang true to me. It sounded like they were speaking the way they should be speaking, interacting the way they should be interacting. I love the interaction between Earth 2 Superman and Obsidian. I thought that was kind of cool.
Yes.
And so there's a lot going on, obviously, but there's a lot of nuance and a lot going on under the surface that's helping to build a foundation of this epic adventure. So yeah. Got to mention Marv.
No, of course, and I think from the research I was doing, he specifically chose these characters for diversity, but he also chose them because they are the lesser known characters, and he didn't want the story to be about Batman, and he didn't want the story to be about Superman. He wanted the story to be about the story.
Yeah, and I think you nailed it, James. That's the perfect way of putting it.
Yeah, and if it became like any of the well-known characters of the time, I think he felt it was going to be too much. You would say Superman's Crisis on Infinite Earths,
or Batman, or Aquaman, or Wonder Woman. Exactly right.
So I guess the fact that I wasn't as familiar with him is Marv would say, "Yep, that's good. That's good. I did my job." So
it's the mark of a great writer if he or she can pull you into their story with basically unknown characters or as Keith puts the background characters, these little known characters, and you become interested in it, and you want to follow their story along the big story. You want to follow their individual arcs. So that's the mark of a great writer. And at this point, Marv was at the peak of his powers.
Yeah.
Also makes the story feel bigger, I think,
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And
Yeah,
funny,
we know the big guns are waiting in the wings.
right. Well, what you're about to get to the issue 2, I connected with because it actually took place. Some of it took place in Gotham City, where I was like familiar with. But and I was gonna say, Keith, just like you with the Flash toy, I knew Firestorm because I had the Super Friends the Superpowers Firestorm figure. I was like, I know who this guy is, and I had the Green Lantern Hal Jordan, but he wasn't John Stewart. I was like, well, I guess they probably know each other. Is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, see,
So,
that reminds me. When I was rereading it, I had a question. I feel like I knew the answer back in the day. I feel like it's just something as simple as it would happen to be a period of time where Hal quit being a Green Lantern. But is that why he's not in this book?
That's why. I think they mention that.
Well, John says he replaced him or whatnot. And I feel like I remember Hal quitting because I later on read those issues when Hal quit.
Yeah, Hal was not GM.
Mm-hmm.
That's correct. Yes.
But
I think right now,
it's odd. It was a year story. They didn't throw him in there at all.
Yeah, this is I guess during Hal's one of his hiatuses from the Rings. So.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah. He was on sabbatical. Whatever.
I kind of like it in the sense where the series really does mirror what the DCU looked like back then, and to have Hal in there, I feel like would have been kind of silly. He doesn't have a ring. I feel like also you wanted to showcase John more because he was new. But I like it that it really does feel like at the same time like a snapshot of what the DCU looked like back then.
Exactly.
Yeah, I like the diversity is good. Like I said, I haven't connected with the characters, but I do appreciate like they're showing a spectrum of different characters and different backgrounds for these characters too. So all right, Joe, you want to give us the synopsis for issue 2?
Issue 2. Timelines start to bleed across the ages. Mammoths from Anthro's era reach the Legion's 30th century. A decaying Flash who disappeared after his murder trial tries to warn Batman about the coming apocalypse. In his satellite, the Monitor explains his past actions and future plans to save what is left of reality to his hand-picked squad of super beings. And is that all I have? I thought I had more.
Well, I don't think there's that's what
I guess that's it. Yeah.
That's what probably happens in this issue. Yeah, which I obviously we'll just probably jump to it. I think obviously the best part of this issue is the Batman Joker Flash scene.
I did have more.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's one is classic Batman and Joker from that era, which I liked, and seeing George Perez draw that is amazing. And then obviously we see the precursor to what's going to happen to the Flash.
Mm-hmm.
Which to me, because I already read that, it just gave me like chills. And I remember because that was my first comic book, and to me, like Barry always seemed like such a tragic character because I always knew his fate. You know what I mean? And then when you got the immediate back issues to his run, like the last 20 issues or 25 issues, it's just he went through a rough time.
Certainly did.
So it was very like seeing that scene, and also drawn by George Perez. It was just a beautiful scene. Man, it was just like this like foreboding, this like heaviness that was coming. It was so well done. And then one of the best parts is Batman up close, like, my God, what is happening? And I'm like, oh, that's what he says. And I'm like, for Batman to say that, I'm like, oh my God. Yeah. It's just like exactly. He's taking that seriously, So that was it's a great issue.
Yeah, I had more, so I won't read it, but I'll just pick from a bullet point. Harbinger reappears and explains the Monitor has stationed 5 devices throughout time and space that maybe will be able to ward off this antimatter flow that's destroying everything. And he disperses groups of the squad he brought together to try to protect these things from the enemy, the dark enemy, so to speak. And then we find out almost the full extent of what's been going on with Harbinger. And near the end of the story, she's basically battling in her mind, Monitor and Anti-Monitor. We don't know who's the Anti-Monitor yet, but who is she going to side with? And obviously, whatever side she picks, all of creation hangs in the balance. So that was a hell of a cliffhanger for issue 2. But watching these groups, let's see what I should find. What I had it. See, I had the page here. Well, there's the page of Barry racing across the destruction of Central City. Keith, this is in real time. This had come right after the quote unquote trial of the Flash, and in that last issue, Barry and Iris go off quote unquote into the sunset. And I'm not sure if I remember if we do know they go to the 30th century, but that's where they were. And he says, I've only been, in the 30th century for a month. I've enjoyed it. Obviously, while they're there, that's where Barry and Iris conceive their children, the twins. And then Barry has to come back because he sees what's going on in the 30th century. And he comes back in time to warn Batman and the others. But, obviously this issue really codifies how important Barry Allen is to this entire epic adventure. And he's the key.
And honestly, at the time, I didn't read. I was tracking down flashback issues. I didn't read it while it was coming out, like you had. But on the back of all the books at that point, they would kind of give you like a little what was coming out that week or that month, and way before the last issue of Flash, which is issue number 350. Crisis was already happening when that book was still being published, and in the last issue it said, follow up in Crisis for the fate of the Scarlet Speedster.
Exactly.
And again, me knowing what was happening, it was like heartbreaking for me to read all this stuff. I was like, you know what I mean? Because for like a hot minute, like 6 months or a year or something like that, Barry was my favorite character until Wally, took over. But I was heartbreaking. But yeah, so what happened was after the trial, for like longtime Flash fans, they know that I think it was issue like 200 around that time, maybe earlier. They revealed that Iris originally wasn't from the current time; she's from the future. There was just, I guess, an issue with the environment in the future. So her parents kind of pulled a Jor-El and sent her back in time, though, to be safe and to have a good life. I don't know. I don't remember the details of how she ended up with being raised by Ira West and the West, but or how they explain that, I don't recall. But that was the thing. So Iris then dies in Flash 275. She's killed at the time, you think, by Clive Yorkin, but it ends up being revealed as Reverse Flash about a year later. And then at the end of the Flash series, you find out that her parents obviously would know when she was going to die, so they captured her essence, put it into a clone body in the future, and then when Barry goes through his troubles, they're reunited and they go off to live happily ever after for a month.
For a month, yeah, for a very short time, yes, unfortunately.
Yeah, they're happy. Even at the end of Flash 350 says, and they lived happily ever after for a while.
For a while, yeah.
But yeah, they lived together for that month, and then where they presumably concede the Tornado Twins, and then the Monitor snatches him out of time when he's vibrating back in time. The Monitor grabs him, and that's it. His fate's sealed.
Yeah, no, it was. It was heartbreaking to see that. I mean, I've been reading The Flash for 20 years at that point, and I had no idea, Wally was coming, that his nephew would take his place after this, and how Wally would, eventually become the greatest Flash of them all. But still, it was rough to see this happen. To know that Barry was not gonna, I don't want to. Well, I'm trying to think now, and I believe, this is 1985, well before the internet, at least was available to the public. So these things were kept under wraps. We didn't know about this. We had, I'm going to use the word here, we had harbingers of what's going to happen, but especially to Barry, but we weren't sure. I mean, nobody knew that they were really going to kill Supergirl. That was really, that was just, oh my God, they're killing Kara. Kara is dead. And that cover that homage cover, I call it the Pietà cover. Well, he's not sitting down. He's standing up holding her. But, that cover's been done to death since in the last 40 years with, when a character dies. Obviously, Arco, help me here if I'm wrong, but I'm thinking X-Men number 137.
Oh, yeah, with the Death of the Phoenix?
Yes,
yeah. Yeah, he's holding Jean Grey's body up, yeah.
Exactly.
I think we talked about that when we did the Dark Phoenix thing. That was... was it Byrne Byrne drew that? Yeah.
Oh yeah, that was
Yeah, Byrne did that. We were saying as a tribute to Perez's Crisis cover. So yeah.
What I found funny though, the Joker scene with the Batman before Barry shows up. I don't know, maybe because the characters. I have a different impression of the Joker over the years now. Like he was very interested in, like, he was getting money for that job,
Yes.
Yeah.
Right? Like he seemed to care about money. Like it was like some kind of. He mentioned what it was. I forgot what it was. It was some kind of whatever it was. It was like either it was bonds or some, I don't know, whatever it was. And I remember just thinking to myself, that does not sound like any Joker.
No, he was surprisingly lucid in those scenes. Yeah.
Yeah.
He wasn't even the Joker from a few years prior, 10 years prior, with that Neil Adams had fixed, so to speak, and made him the homicidal maniac. So yeah, it was again a different writer, a different take on it.
But it's fun too, is to have like a not so maniacal. I love all the different versions, but it's kind of nice to have like a. I was even thinking about that last night. Like it's just like Super Friends, but darker than that. But it's nice having a superhero universe and not everything's so awful and gritty.
Well, can we reference 3 Jokers and one of them being the clown?
Right.
Yeah.
Right, there we go.
Yeah, so, he's the clown. Yeah. I like in this issue, things already go wrong with Psycho Pirate.
Oh yeah,
it goes bad right away.
That guy he's
been on the team for 1 issue and it's already falling apart.
Yep.
He's really messed up in the head.
Yeah, and so I guess previously he would feel pain when he uses his power. Now he just he feels nothing, right?
Exactly.
So now we really can't stop. Like,
that's terrible for him. Yeah.
So I liked it went off the rails in issue 2. I also like that Batman and Superman meet on top of the Daily Planet, and then they encounter Pariah, who is the guy crying, I guess, throughout the entire series.
The whole thing.
Yeah, he cries a lot, doesn't he?
A little side note, I think it's funny. They made way too many like sequels, either whether they be direct or indirect of this book. I think Infinite Crisis was the best one. I actually like 0 Hour, even though I don't like stuff that happened in it. But Infinite Crisis was great. Then they went to Final Crisis, whatever, all these things. But when they finally came back, I think Josh Williamson did the Dark Crisis. I'm like, oh, you guys are grasping at straws using Pariah as a villain, man.
Yeah.
No one's scared anywhere. Trust me.
I love. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Joe. Go ahead, Joe.
No, I was going to say what I loved about issue 2 was again we have the World War II, because now we're traveling through time, right? So we're back in time in December 1944, near the end of the war. Geoforce and Dr. Polaris, the poor man's Magneto. And, and there's Sergeant Rock and Easy Company. There's Jeb Stewart and the Haunted Tank, and there's the Losers. By the way, the Losers have their own. The Losers are I think the only war book that gets a special tied into this. I have it in my war comic book box, and I have yet to read it. I should have read it for this, but I thought maybe it's spoiled. But we see them; they go away and they die. I'm looking at the top of page 16 where Captain Cloud, Captain Storm, Gunner, and Sarge, they're gone. And they never think they respect the Losers. And then we see the Western heroes, Jonah Hex, Batlash getting tossed out on his ass at the top of page 20. A very obscure Nighthawk, and the character who was known as Scalp Hunter.
Oh, wait, Joe, I think you're in issue 3.
Am I in issue 3? I'm sorry. I jumped
That's all right. That's fine.
Okay,
fine.
Yeah. Well,
the only thing I guess I wanted to wrap up from issue 2 before we jump into issue 3 is, once again, my lack of... I've not read any Commandy, so I was...
Oh, that's right.
Neither have I. I've seen it pop up, but I have no idea.
And then I've read, just because of some other podcasts I was listening to, getting ready for this our own recording, but I guess the mammoths and the people in the Neanderthal people in the beginning, they had their own comic book at one point too.
Oh, you mean Anthro?
Yeah, Anthro.
I bought that book as a kid. Yeah, I don't have them anymore. I think it was 7 issues. Yeah.
Never read any Anthro, so that whole scene was like, I just took that scene as like these must be they're going for prehistoric characters, I guess.
No, that's
honestly, I didn't know them either, and one thing jumped out at me now, but not from before, is almost like a weird sequel relating to the original. Grant Morrison used Anthro in the first few pages of Final Crisis.
Really? Wow. Okay.
I remember that. Wow.
I recognize his design.
Okay.
Not that there's much more of a design than a caveman, but like it definitely was him. And I'm like, wait a minute. But I have no. It definitely seemed like something more than caveman because his wife had like a red dress on.
Yeah, but for me, like having no knowledge and even at this pass through, if I didn't do any research, I would have been like, okay, they're focusing on this little Neanderthal prehistoric family. I guess it's good writing too, because I didn't like, it was written well enough that I was like, okay, we're just having a scene to show.
Yep.
I thought it was meant to like reinforce like the timelines are falling apart and worlds are fading into each other. But I guess if Joe knew it, and I guess he's Wolfman is touching on everything. He's just
I like when the mammoths are rampaging through the 30th century and the science police is about to take them out, and Phantom Girl says, "No, stop! We're not going to kill them. We'll handle this." And the Legion handles it without killing any of these poor beasts. And then there's a scene where Commandy meets Superman. He says, "Superman," because Commandy, if you read the original Commandy series by Kirby, there was an issue where Commandy finds Superman's costume after the Great Disaster. So something happens to Superman in that Great Disaster, and Commandy knows about Superman. So he's finally met Superman, but it's not the Superman he knows about. So he's even more confused here, Commandy.
Yeah.
But, there's all little things like that if you had been reading like me all this time, we often say Easter eggs. There were tons of Easter eggs all over the place here for long-time readers.
And then at this point now, Alexander Luthor has grown up to be a toddler
Mm-hmm.
already.
Yeah, he's growing very quickly, isn't he?
Yeah, because what the Monitor said for Harbinger to bring Alexander Luthor to him, that was before part of her gets sidetracked with our unknown mysterious villain in the last few pages of issue 2. So
we see on page 24, we see him in silhouette.
Yep.
In those long horizontal panels, we see him a couple times. Yeah. But we don't see him yet. And then the last page is Lila, torn apart between two masters, so to speak. Yeah. So. I'm sorry I jumped ahead by that.
No, I was going to say, well, now, Joe, you can give your summary, and we can jump to Sergeant Rock and the Western characters.
So the Monitor continues to watch Alexander Luthor from Earth 2 continue to grow, and notes that the boy is both matter and antimatter and could be the key to halting the multiversal destruction. Meanwhile, a dark shadowy figure who controls the psychopirate in Harbinger, instructs that it is time for her to betray her benefactor, aka the Monitor. Barry Allen is pulled back into present day Earth to continue his warning of the coming doom, but then he disappears in front of Superman, Batman, the Titans, and the Outsiders. Brainiac is now aware of the crisis and seeks one individual on Earth. And across time, World War II, the Old West, and the 30th century heroes battle to protect the Monitor's towering devices. Sergeant Rock, Easy Company, Lieutenant Jeb Stewart, the Haunted Tank, the Losers, who were wiped out, Jonah Hex, Nighthawk, Scalp Hunter, Batlash, the Legion of Superheroes all continue to fight a losing battle, and Harbinger arrives back at the Monitor's station to kill him. So that's issue 3.
And this book definitely starts to feel more like the DC universe we know. We got the Titans, the Outsiders, seeing Nightwing there, Batman, Superman. This definitely is like probably the first issue where you're like, oh, this resembles, the DCU. Even if you have a vague, even if you just watch JLU, you'd be like, oh, I recognize some of these characters. It was great. And, such a good issue. And this time when we see Barry, it's actually Barry. It's not a future image that, time travel kind of thing. It's him. It's him now.
Yeah. I thought this issue was good. Like you were just saying, it grounds you. I wouldn't say finally, because, again, it's about the greater story, but this is the DC universe. This is for a person like, me who was, when I was coming to this young, like, oh, okay. I had these figures of these people. I recognize some of these people. That's the Brainiac that I grew up with. It was the Machine, because that's what the
yes, that wasn't the pink and green Brainiac with the nodes on his head, right? Exactly.
Yeah, the one they choose for superpowers was the robot and everything. And but yeah, these are like, I feel like this issue is like these little vignettes are cool just to kind of maybe bring the audience finally into the DC universe proper with more familiar characters.
I think that's exactly what Marv and George Perez were doing here. Perez was also, listed as co-creator on this also, so I'm sure he had a lot of input. I want to draw these characters, but and Marv would probably say, well, we have to make sure it's organic, and he'd say, okay, so how do we pull them in, and this way we can get the rest of the audience that's reading along with us, especially the older guys and girls, to come along for the ride. So I think that was planned. I don't think it was happenstance at all.
Yeah, because not a lot happens in this issue per se. I mean, a lot of action happens, but in terms of like the overall plot, it's not an issue that moves the plot more than the heroes are defending the towers and meeting resistance and trying to stop the destruction of the world. But you get to see all your heroes finally.
Yeah. No, it's very, very true.
Which just makes it all seem even more, there's more stakes because like, oh, these are my guys now.
These are my guys now. Okay, things are really starting to heat up here. Yep, exactly.
And the paneling and the layout, Joe, is beautiful. Like if you're looking at these pages, like George, he's playing with the 9-panel grid, like not doing it, like breaking it, having certain panels bleed into like he's doing all the work. Like he's doing everything.
I love
great
these
cover too. The cover is just great. How it's all broken up. The right here you see the.
It's beautiful.
It's a gorgeous cover. I love it.
I was going to dig my copies out of 1, 2, and 3, but I couldn't move all those boxes today, so I brought this along.
Oh yeah, this is the hardcover.
Yes, the hardcover. Yeah.
I mean, page 5 is awesome with like the outsiders and the Legion. I mean, the Titans. Trying to stop that building from.
It's gorgeous. Yep. Mm-hmm.
That angle too,
and everything.
That angle,
the camera angle. Yeah, he was noted for that. He would position his camera the way a director would. He's a director here, George Perez. It's exactly. There's that scene where that building's about to crumble and fall on Donna, and you just see that blur, and we know it's Superman's cape, but he just zips in and he saves her. That was kind of cool.
Because I know nothing about his powers. Did Metamorpho wrap himself around the building?
Yes, he did.
Happened? Okay, yeah. I didn't know he could do that. So I was like,
we'd have to ask Mark Waid if he could do that because Mark Waid is very, very.
Big Metamorpho.
Big Metamorpho fan, and
Metamorpho
can only interact with chemicals that are in the human body. He can't change something to kryptonite because there's no kryptonite in the human body. So.
To me, though, I kind of thought I was a little confused of why, and I'm not a Wonder Woman expert or even to a certain degree older Titan stuff. I didn't know. I was kind of curious why Superman would have to save Donna Troy from that. I thought she was like Wonder Woman kind of level strength,
Yeah, but it's always been a question of how invulnerable Wonder Woman and Wonder Girl are. I've always had this question, and here it is. I'm going to throw it out so folks, if you're listening, please get back to us. If Wonder Woman is invulnerable, why does she have to, bounce bullets off her bracelets? Why can't just bounce off of her, right? It's the same thing with Thor, especially in the early days of Thor. He'd have to swing the hammer if people were shooting at him. I mean, come on. So I think...
Maybe it still hurts, Joe, just like Wolverine. Like he can get
so.
shot, and he does get shot, but he'd prefer not to get shot.
Well, we see that scene in Justice League where that goon... tries to hit one with the butt of his rifle and it breaks when it hits her, right? Yeah. So we know she's tough and she has near invulnerability, but I don't think Wonder Woman, or maybe in this case, Wonder Girl could survive an entire building crumbling on her. Maybe it wouldn't kill her, but it probably hurt her severely. So that's why Superman streaks to the rescue. Yeah. I'm just, spitballing here.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, I definitely believe that. Like I said, like I think like, Wonder Woman could take bullets, but they probably hurt.
Yeah. And one more thing, the World War II sequence. You're an artist, James. I think you'd appreciate this. That snowstorm they're battling in, and the way George Perez depicts that, it's just great. The snow is there. It's not intrusive, but it's still there. It's snowing. It's just gorgeous to look at. It really is.
It's every page here is like a mini masterpiece. Oh, is this when Dr. Polaris says the Magneto's line, "I'm the master of magnetism"?
Yeah. I think that was put there on purpose. Without a doubt.
I was laughing at that. I'm like, oh, okay. They're just taken right from that.
I believe Polaris was a a Green Lantern, a Hal Jordan villain. Yeah, I think that's
Yeah,
where he
I think so.
appeared. Yes, back in the Silver Age. Yeah, and then he would pop up and he would make trouble for the Titans, the New Titans, and some other characters. But
I
yeah,
like Solivar and Commandy talking. where he
that was
said
very touching when Solivar dies, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and because Commandy, lived in a world where animals were intelligent and humans weren't, and he had many quote unquote animal friends, intelligent friends that he loved, and were his friends, and he took that very hard. That was a very touching sequence, I thought.
Yeah.
I really, that was very well written. Yeah.
Yeah. This is this issue is great. I'm just like kind of flipping through my digital copy or just looking at all the pages. Again, and now reading this, I understand more about Sergeant Rock and stuff like that. But I still haven't really read a lot of Sergeant Rock, to be perfectly honest. But I understand, the importance of that whole sequence now more than I previously did.
Yeah, Rock was the premier war character at DC. He was kind of like the Superman of the war characters, I said off air before we started. There was one character from the war comics that I thought was conspicuously absent. That was the Unknown Soldier. But I guess they couldn't fit everybody in.
I think he wasn't he in? No, that was Haunted Tank. Okay,
that's Jeff Stewart in the Haunted Tank. We don't see all those guys. There's 4 guys in the Haunted Tank. There's a tank crew, 4 guys, and of course Jeb is talking to his ancestor, Colonel Jeb Stewart or General Jeb Stewart. Yeah. And and every time he pops up, then we know there's going to be there's going to be an adventure with the Haunted Tank in World War II. So he pops up here. He's kind of like a watered down version of the Watcher, the ghost of Jeb Stewart. So he brings it all together, Marv. He really does. They're not there for dressing. They're there for a reason.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it has a great final shot at the end of issue 3 with Harbinger getting ready to kill the Monitor.
Let me see. Let me get to that. That is very, very. Yep. Yeah. Oh, that's fantastic. It really is. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like the way he breaks up the page.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great page. Which the Monitor knew this ahead of time, doesn't he?
Yes, he did. He knew he was going to be betrayed. He knew this.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So very Shakespearean, and it's
yes, it is. Oh, that's very good. There you go. Yep, very Shakespearean. Yep. Now I had some more. Did I have any more flash facts? Let me see. Let's see. No. That's I think we covered them all.
Well, I guess I just again researched interesting facts that came along is I guess what Firebrand was created by Roy Thomas. Is that correct?
Yes, in the All-Star Squadron series. I don't know if she was an actual. If it's created by Roy Thomas, then she couldn't have existed in the Golden Age. That's true.
Yeah, she was. Yeah, I remember reading that later. She was created I think it was All Star Comics or the Young All Stars, one of those.
It was I'm pretty sure it was All-Star.
That's based on his wife. What I read, that's
Yeah, because her name is Danette Riley, I think.
Yeah.
And Danette was his first wife, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a tribute to his wife, which is some rumors is why Marv chose to do that, use her to save that character because it was meant something to Roy Thomas.
She's a good character. She got a great visual too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So it's he could have. I mean, my God, when you think of the JSA, holy cow, there's so many he could have picked. But yeah. I had no problem with Firebrand. Yeah. Not at all. So. That's a great series, by the way. If you ever get a chance to read All-Star Squadron, that is a fantastic, fantastic series by Roy Thomas and some really great writers, including about a year's worth of Jerry Ordway art. Oh my God, what a beautiful book that is.
Well, I'll have to check out some of these things that I have not previously checked out as we're going through this, or when we're done going through it, just to catch up on. Because I think most of the stuff is now all collected. Yeah.
Is Infinity Inc. collected, James? Because Obsidian is a member of Infinity Inc. along with his sister Jade, Alan Scott's children.
I'll have to take a look. If it's probably, I don't know if it's on Hoopla, but it's probably collected. I mean, I feel like a lot of these things should be at this point collected.
What do you think, guys? I mean, it's 1985, 86. People are reading this. Keith is 10 years old. Thank God he had his uncle to fill in the back issues. But, I'm wondering how people were finding out the backstory of all these characters. Oh, these characters are cool. I need to find out more. I guess they were going to their local LCSs and digging through the bins, so to speak, because there weren't that many trades out at the time, correct? I mean, so I don't think there was a
I think
collection.
that might be one of the reasons why so many of these older comics were so like info dump heavy. So much exposition because there was really no other way to kind of find out. So if they wanted to introduce
Yeah.
an old character, they kind of had to put it out there somehow. Otherwise, I mean,
Yeah.
Well, this was like the bridge, though, wasn't it? Like Crisis was meant to like wrap up, like for you, Joe, like a person who collected, like give them an ending to the first 20 years, and then like reboot it for, I guess they're hoping new readers, which it worked at least for Man of Steel, and I think other books,
Man of Steel, Wonder Woman, yep, definitely worked for Flash, yeah.
So I guess this was like a half and half. Let's appease our older our longer audience, but let's hope we can get a newer audience going forward. So
and they did. And by the way, not everybody was happy with Man of Steel. I was delighted with Man of Steel. I was crazy about it. I was delighted with Perez's Wonder Woman, and yeah, it took a while to get used to Wally because he was a jerk, right, Keith, at the beginning.
Oh, yeah. I loved it because I was like also remembering how he acted in Crisis. Mike Barron wrote him different than he was ever been written. Like a real jerk. I still enjoyed it. I still liked it a lot because I even as a little kid I knew that this guy was going to change. He was a 20-year-old kid who, and later the other writers kind of interweaved it in there perfectly. Like he lost his mentor, the person he looked up to the most. He took over the mantle to honor him, but then in a case of imposter syndrome, he behaved like a jerk, so he could never like surpass him because he was a jerk, and until he got over that. But yeah.
I also believe that DC wanted to start all their books over with a new number ones when this thing concluded, but they didn't do that. Obviously, with Action Comics and Detective Comics, and was Adventure Comics still around at the time? I think so. Not sure, but obviously there was a new Superman number one, Wonder Woman 1, Flash,
Justice League.
Yeah, Justice League, right? That was so cool.
Fun fact about the Flash, though, you could read this. I think, Joe, you think you have the Flash companion book. I have a copy. They knew that they were going to kill off Barry and replace him, but it wasn't going to be Wally originally. It was going to be a completely different character who didn't even have speed powers. It'd be like light powers kind of thing. I think something similar to what they eventually did in the Tangent universe. But that's like you can Google it too. It's out there. That was yeah. It wasn't supposed to be Wally. Then it just never kind of came together. So
Thank
at
God.
the end they had this. They had to pull the trigger on something, and Wally was kind of like the only option, really, not even the safe option.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, good. That's yeah. Oh, so Joe, to answer your question, at least for Hoopla, Hoopla has Infinity Inc., the Generations Saga Volume 1 that collects All-Star Squadron 25 and 26.
That's
and
where they
Infinity
premiered.
Inc. 1 through 4.
Yeah, back in the 80s, DC would slip into a regular comic, a new comic. They did that with Infinity Inc., slipping into All-Star Squadron. They did with Teen Titans in, was it, oh man. Okay, was it DC Comics Presents where they slipped in Teen Titans? Steve Perel, help me out again. But yeah, so yeah, they would do that all the time. Yeah, that was...
so that's available. So I have to read that at some point. So
well, see, I'm not sure when it starts, James, but I don't think it's the beginning. But at some point, Todd McFarlane takes over the art.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
Oh yeah.
Let's see. He's who knows? Hoopla is not always on point with the art team. So they have Roy Thomas as the writer, and then Jerry Ordway and Joe Kubert as the artist.
I think it started that way, and then later.
Okay.
Kubert was doing the covers. Yeah, Kubert didn't do any interiors. He was doing the covers. Where did the Teen Titans first bow? They were an insert in the comic. It could have been Justice League. It's impossible. We're talking 60 years.
Well, so just to kind of like, I guess as we wrap up like our first part of Crisis of what do we find any like reflections on the first three? Anything we want to Additional thoughts or things we want to give the audience before our next part, which will be issues. Was it? We're doing 4, 5, and 6.
5 and 6.
5 and 6 will be next.
I wanted to keep reading, but I said no. If I read, then we do this a month later, I'll forget. So I'm going to hold off on it. But I was stunned at how well it holds up. Obviously, I knew the art was going to be great, but the writing is just so spot on, damn good.
I'm so glad we're doing this because I've been meaning to reread this for many years now, and I needed kind of like a push, and I'm so glad I did because I'm loving it. It brings me back,
Yeah, it does.
It brings me back to the old. I don't know. It's a wonderful book. It's kind of. I know Secret Wars was big, but to me, this is like the template for an event.
Yeah. I mean, I guess Jim. Well. Jim Shooter, for good or for ill, he created the yearly Marvel company crossover, and at DC, this is the kickoff. This is the definitive Crisis, but it kicked off how many other Crisis that we are.
Crisis is ab nauseum. Yes.
What I will say, at least for the most part, Marvel generally does different events every year. I mean, there are a couple sequels in there, but DC's done literally 7 crises that are about the multiverse being destroyed. And after this one, and even after the Infinite Crisis one, which was kind of a reverse crisis, but they wouldn't even build up the new multiverse again, so you'd actually care the next time. I'm like,
the next one after this 0 Hour.
0 Hour was a kind of a sequel, but an unofficial sequel. And then it was Infinite Crisis because we don't count Identity Crisis, obviously. But then it was Final Crisis.
And what was Convergence? Was that after, or was
Convergence? Was after New 52.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
that doesn't make any sense at all. I defy anybody to read Convergence and try to put that, put those square pegs in a round hole or vice versa. It just doesn't make any sense.
Only good thing about that are the miniseries tie-ins because you get some really good creative teams telling stories from different eras.
Yeah, I didn't buy all those books. I just couldn't. There were too many.
I don't even understand that story. I read it twice. I'm like,
I have no idea what that story's about. I do know that there's a big, gigantic moment that happens between pages, and it happens off screen. It's like, what are you kidding? You this is a big event. You advertise it. You want people to read it, and you have this climactic moment that you don't even show. That's like, okay, all right. Enough of that.
I will say though,
go back and read this guy, DC. Read the Wolfman and Perez. They show you how to do it.
I will say it would be nice because I think this year it also would be the 10th anniversary or no 20th anniversary. Oh my God, of Infinite Crisis. If you guys would want to do that at some point, because I think that's a true sequel that deserves to be celebrated. I love that book as well, and probably the best build up to an event, in my opinion, ever.
I would agree with that. Yes, I would definitely agree with that. Yeah.
Well, our plan for this is to do this once a quarter, ideally, and within this year, audience, because I know
got to be within the calendar. Yeah, that's right.
When we do sometimes multi-part things, I know it may take years, but this won't be as long as the Star Trek one. And no, I'm planning. I mean, to wrap up Crisis within this year. So if we have time to get to Infinite Crisis too, or if we can't fit it in here, we just want to do it as an epilogue and continue on with it, like whenever we finish, we'll just
that's an idea.
We just keep going. We can so. But yeah, we're I feel these at least this saga needed the time to breathe.
Yes, most definitely.
Not taking, like I said, we're going to be recording our second part of Secret Wars. But Secret Wars was a little more of a simpler, not in a bad way, simpler story than what Crisis was trying to do.
It's a more linear story, obviously. This is hardly linear because it's taking place across all time.
Yeah, it's 20 years of history, which is,
There's some definite...
Marv Wolfman, I'd love to have you on the podcast, obviously for lots of things, but,
I would suspect that this book would be Sheldon's favorite comic book.
In Big Bang Theory?
Yeah, because think about it. We have the alternate universes, alternate timelines, all time existing at once, string theory, whatever you want to. I mean, there's physics, there's astrophysics. This has got to be his most favorite book of all time. just can't imagine it wouldn't
It's
be.
either his favorite or the one he picks apart the most, Joe. So.
I like that even better because he would find out, yeah, everything is wrong with it. Yeah.
He'd be yelling at, "There's no grounded reality with the monitor."
Yeah, right.
So,
That'd be good.
This was a fantastic kickoff to our Crisis series, celebrating its 40th anniversary. Listening audience, I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope if you're listening to this, I hope if you're listening to us and you haven't read it, you go pick up Crisis.
Yeah.
And you can start reading it to catch up and be ready for our next part. And if you have read it, I hope you get some little tidbits, some nostalgia, and if we've missed some key points or we got some facts wrong, you can leave some comments.
Oh, yeah, we always
wherever you can find this podcast, there's an ability to leave a comment. So you can, if you're listening to it, there's a way to reach us, and we'd love to hear from you. But of course, I could not enter the multiverse without my two other hosts to guide me. So thank you very much, Joe.
Oh, yo, quite welcome, James. This was great stuff.
And thank you, Keith.
Thank you, James. A pleasure.
And listening audience, again, you can find us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Spotify. If you can leave comments on Spotify, we'd love to interact with you that way. We do appreciate you listening to us. Please share it if you know someone who would enjoy hearing about Crisis. This is a big storyline. Lots of people enjoy this one. We thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you on the next episode.